Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another very exciting Civilizations in Review. My name is Ben, and I'm here with another fabulous content writer, Ana Mariel Capusano, to help me co-interview Abby Hawkins, the fabulous writer who wrote about the Lakhmid Kingdom. Thanks again for joining us live here on Facebook. We will also be posting this great information from this conversation today on our website, on our Instagram, on our YouTube, and on our Spotify. So you can engage with this content in every place you may see. But of course, there's so much more to talk about than we will fit in tonight's call. So please make sure to go to the Civilizations 101 section of the Alphazaic website, scroll all the way down to Lakhmid and dive in and read along with us. I will read the 101 word intro, and then we'll jump into asking Abby all about her wonderful work here with the Lakhmid Kingdom. So to begin, for 3 centuries, the Lakhmid Kingdom, or Al-Manandira in Arabic, was ruled by the Banu Lakhm dynasty. Amr ibn Adi, the dynasty's founder, is a descendant of the Lakhm tribe that originated from Qahtani, Yemen. This is mentioned in the 3rd century Pakuli inscriptions description of the Sasanian Empire, or Sassanid as you may know it, to which the Lakhmid kingdom was a vassal state. Before being annexed by the Sasanian Empire, the Lakhmid kingdom extended from Saudi Arabia to the south of modern-day Iraq, with the ancient city of Al-Hira as its capital. The Lakhmid kingdom served as an influential region for Nestorian Christianity throughout its reign. Wow, there is so much to unpack there, but as I'm going to start every call with Abby, what gravitated you towards the Lakhmids? Why did you choose to write about them?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's great to be here first and foremost. I, like most people in high school, did a lot of world history classes that would mention the Silk Road trading route that stretched through the Lakhmid Empire, or the Lakhmid Kingdom, my apologies. And I remember looking at the different kingdoms, different like empires, to do a Civilization 101 on, and Lakhmid, I remember I'd heard the word before, and I was like, okay, I'm racking my brain, where did I hear this before? And I'd actually come across a research paper that had shown that pottery fragments and Sasanian coins had been found along the trading route that dated back to the Lakhmid kingdom. And I was really interested in finding out more about the kingdom. I had a very basic understanding of it stretching from Saudi Arabia to modern day Iraq, but I didn't have much more information beyond that. And one thing that was really interesting, looking into researching Lakhmid empires or the Lakhmid kingdom, I keep using those interchangeably, is how influential it was in Nestorian Christianity, and then learning more about what that meant, and then also looking into seeing the modern day influences that the Lakhmid kingdom has had, particularly in influential political families and the Druze political families in Lebanon. So stretching from 3rd century now to modern day relevant political events is really interesting.
That's actually great and fascinating. You would think, a lot of times when we see this sort of big empires, we have to think about both like how religion impacted them and how the ruling system was sort of formed. And I think it's incredible that, even in the future centuries to come, we saw sort of different empires in this particular regions of Saudi Arabia and Iraq. So I think it had a lot of influence with that. One thing I always wonder about these great empires is how they sort of set up their political system, or how their ruling system kind of translates to today, or even, how they did it in that time, just because it's always fascinating to understand how politics worked in sort of that dynamic.
Yeah, so the ruling system was one of the sections that I really had a great time researching because there was just so little information. It really goes to show like how impactful written history is. The Byzantine Empire later in like the 6th century had a lot of detail. The historians had really detailed records of the area that encompassed the Lakhmid Kingdom, particularly its decline. But not a ton is known about how the political like structure was formed. We do know that the founder of the kingdom, Amr ibn Abi, he'd broken away from the pre-existing Seleucid dynasty that really kind of declined with the death of his uncle, King Jatima al-Abrash. So outside of that, he, the founder under Ibn Abi, had really moved the kingdom to the city of Al-Hira, which previously was mostly a dead city. He really revived that city. That looking at is really interesting. Was a city that existed south of the modern city of Kufa in Iraq today. And it kind of lived and died with the Lakhmid Empire. So looking into like the ruling system, we do know that it went through several different dynastic rulers, save for a Persian invasion in 325 CE. They ruled as a vassal state of the Sasanian Empire, following kind of the dynastic rule. The kind of political system that they had very much dissolved following, there was a lot of suspicion of treason under the king Numan III against the ruling king of the Sasanian Empire, Khosrau II, in which in that time, the kingdom was annexed by the Sasanian Empire and then largely fell apart. The military was very important. The naval system was very well developed under the empire, under the kingdom, and they chose very much not to support the state that they were annexed under. And then former members acted upon actually the Rashidun Caliphate general Khalid ibn al-Walid, which really led to kind of the decline of then the Sasanian Empire and then the spread of the kind of like Islamic spread of the area.
So in that response, you named 4 other Alphuzaic empires. What I think is really fascinating about the Lakhmids is that they're a really large player in this period of history, really regionally. A vassal state, like a colony is not the right word, but a connection to a larger empire, as is the Lakhmids. But you mentioned, their biggest rival, the Ghassanids, the Rasulids, the Sasanians. All 3 of those are on our Alphuzaic website, so go explore those. They're also hyperlinked in her article on the Lakhmids. What I think is really interesting is during this specific period of history that the empire began, right before Islam really came to the scene, is really fascinating. I think one of the only pieces of the Lakhmids I knew about was the archaeology or archaeological discoveries that were discovered by early Muslims 400 years after the empire ended, but right at the beginning of Islam, which was still 1,000+ years ago. So I really didn't know much more other than that discovery of their recent history, our very ancient history. But again, I just think it's interesting that in that sentence you name dropped and also hyperlinked in this article 4 other very influential empires all at the same time, all right before Islam really began. I'm curious on sort of the connection between all these other empires. I know obviously they're very strong with the Sasanians, given that they are their vassal state. But if you want to chat a little bit more about the other empires at the time in more depth, if you'd like to jump into that.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was super fascinating for me to sometimes for me it's very difficult to see things in history occurring concurrently. So seeing the influence that all of these other kingdoms that are in the Civilizations 101, as well as the Roman Empire, and then the kind of Persian Empire, all of these playing into each other. So the Lakhmids really were connected to so many different groups in terms of the relations that really were defining of the kingdom. The Lakhmids and the Sasanians, or the Persians, as they would later be known, really played into each other as being a vassal state. Another really important group that the Lakhmids interacted with quite frequently is the Ghassanids, which was the Byzantine vassal state that emigrated from starting in Yemen to areas of southern Syria around the 3rd century. So relations between during the time the Ghassanids and the Lakhmids really the relations, the rivalry was defined on actually like Christianity, the different lines, whereas the Lakhmid kingdom was a very large component of Nestorian Christianity. They also had close relations with the Roman Empire, actually seeking help from the Roman Empire, which they, under Constantinople, did not receive that assistance, which actually led to a Persian invasion. Relations between the Lakhmids and the Persians actually were usually pretty good. Unfortunately, the Battle of Dekar, which is in the allies and rival sections, if you're interested in learning more, I'll save the detailed explanation of the rise and fall of the military there. The Sasanians were actually defeated in that battle by the Lakhmids, and that really soured relations between the two of them. By the largest, like, I guess, economic value of the Lakhmid empires as far as the trading route went is they were one of the largest proponents of like modern agriculture. They really relied on this agricultural system and really invested in canals and other infrastructure that helped promote them within this agriculture. They also really interacted with the other empires along the trading routes. That's why, for me, the first bit of knowledge that I had was the pottery fragments and Sasanian coins that were found as far south as southern Yemen and stretching through that entire route. So seeing how they were able to interact economically with all of these different kingdoms. Under one of the earlier kings, I think it was the third, King Imru al-Qais, really was very invested. He was one of the largest, or one of the earliest proponents of a unified independent Arab kingdom. So throughout his rule, he really was invested in the expansion along the Arabian Peninsula. That's why we can see evidence as far south as Najran, which is a city on the border of Saudi Arabia and Yemen. So we can really see his attempts to spread the Lakhmid kingdom and then further as part of the Sasanian Empire throughout the region, which is of course an idea that came further into play with the Islamic expansion following the decline of the kingdom.
Wow, yeah, I think it's really fascinating how you incorporated those elements together, because I think that one cannot actually function without the other. Like the military does need that to, a lot of area to spread. So, sort of letting the public sort of understand that agriculture actually drove them to have these connections is very important, because of a lot of times, we think about these militaries and then we say they were, incredibly strong and defeated the Sasanian, but like, how did we sort of acquire that strength and that military power? And I think that a lot of times it comes from your allies, your rivals, and sort of like, what more can you bring into the sort of the kingdom itself? And I think that's great. I want to like give them the opportunity to kind of take a look at the allies and rivals sort of idea, but I think that it kind of also merges a little bit with the key accomplishments of what the empire kingdom kind of looked like, and it is great to see one specific part that you mentioned earlier, which is how it was in the Christianity sort of aspect of before I moved to Islam. But even in Lebanon, as you mentioned, there's still Christianity there, so it's really prevalent even today, and it's really interesting. So I'd like to I don't know, maybe ask you more if there's any key accomplishments that sort of come up to you when you think about those aspects of the Lakhmid.
Yeah, so there's two that come to mind. I think a lot of times when we think about empires and kingdoms during this time period, we think of military accomplishments. How much land were they able to encompass? What other kingdoms were they able to defeat? And for me, like the most prevailing accomplishments, one being the fact that we can see evidence of the Lakhmid kingdom allegedly today, in that there was a prince in the Lakhmid Empire known as Prince Arslan bin Malik, and that name Arslan, following the decline of the empire, that name continued on to the political family. And now the former Lebanese Minister of Defense, Talal Arslan, has that same name. So we're able to see that the kingdom the important families that existed within the Lakhmid kingdom really were able to survive into today, which I think is super fascinating. Another thing that I thought was really interesting is the influence of the Lakhmid Empire had with kind of the rise and fall of the city of Al-Hira. This became a very important birthplace for several famous poets that exist in kind of the pre-Islamic, I guess, like very eloquent poetry of the time, as well as other notable poets following later after with the spread of Islam, such as like Jaratha ibn al-Abd and Amr ibn al-Husum, both visited the city of Al-Hira. It really served as kind of a cultural place of importance. And I think those are both really just interesting things that came out of the kingdom that are not really thought of when you think of the kind of the spread of the Lakhmid kingdom into the Sasanian Empire, into the Byzantine Empire, into then the Islamic spread throughout the region. Those things kind of get left out. I think this is just like very fascinating. And of course, there are other incredible things that we were able to see from their kind of more traditional like military history, in which we see very successful, very well-developed naval powers that were able to spread across the Arabian Peninsula in a far larger capacity than a lot of other kingdoms were able to at that time.
Your name dropping ability in remembering these kings literally 2,000 years ago is incredibly impressive, Abby. I just want to start off by saying how incredibly well researched you are. That's really cool that you have these names. I think this is so interesting that I want to talk about it more. I know you already mentioned it already, but Nestorian Christianity, really fascinating branch of Christianity anyways, and this was the time pre-Islam, so that was the guiding religious philosophy, faith movement, what have you, of the region. I know the Ghassanids, which we have done on a previous call, it's also on the website, it's also hyperlinked in our article, was a different sect of Christianity, which I know was the schism. But if you want to talk a little bit more about Nestorian Christianity and your awareness of it, I think that would be a really cool space here.
Sure. So for my, like, I guess, like 101 religions here, Nestorianism is kind of the Christian doctrine that, rather thinking of kind of the figure of the Son of God, Jesus, as one figure, it thinks of Jesus kind of as existing as two different persons, the human Jesus as well as like the divine Son of God, rather than as like a unified kind of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. So Nestorius was a patriarch of Constantinople, so bringing back to the kind of the Roman Empire, was kind of the, I guess, figurehead of spreading this doctrine. And the conflict that really kind of created the schism that plays into the separation between the Hassanids and the Lakhmid kingdom is at the I think it was, correct, I might be off on this. I think it's 431 was the Council of Ephesus, and there was a conflict that led to the separation of the Syrian church from the east, as well as the Byzantine church. And the Assyrian church kind of refused to like denounce their support of Nestorius, and then thus it was continued to like the religion was referred to as kind of Nestorianism, to just differentiate it from different other ancient churches, and the kind of Nestorian missionaries of like the Assyrian Church of the East were able to kind of spread this belief throughout Persia, and then further then into Central and East Asia later on, reaching China by this 6th century, and then also I think was able to actually take hold in places as far as Mongolia and Korea. So it was really interesting how the kind of the doctrine was able to originate really in the 5th century. So before the decline of the Lakhmid kingdom in the 6th century, and take hold in kind of that region as being very important for the Lakhmid kingdom, being a place for supporters of this religion to really kind of find a place of refuge and be able to establish their faith and their beliefs within that area.
That is incredibly fascinating and so full of information, because even for someone who like, has been in Christianity all their life, like this is like completely new. And it made me actually want to go into the link that you posted and like click on it and learn everything about Nestorian Christianity. But I think that the biggest portion of it is how far it spread even after sort of like the kingdom wasn't prevalent anymore in the area. And considering that, when we think about, the Middle Eastern area and sort of like a little bit more of like the Southeast Asian area and those sort of countries together, we think about, other religions, we think about Islam, or, more in like Asia, we think about Buddhism. And so the way that it sort of spread, I think it usually how you want a system to be established in the first place. You want to have that influence, you want to continue to spread and have long ways of ruling, because really that's what ruling it's all about. So in those times, even I know for sure a lot of these kingdoms, empire, and dynasties were reliant on religion itself. So it's just, when it comes to mind, it's really an amazing sort of research that to do, to think about how Nestorian Christianity it was really prevalent in the region in the time, and how it's still there today because of kingdoms like Lakhmid that allowed it to be sort of present. And I think that's wonderful. If there is, I don't know, anything else that you'd like to tell us that, that makes you, that also surprises, because I know that a lot of these things were also surprising, particularly the size of the kingdom itself, and how, sort of easy it was. And I'm sure it wasn't easy for you to find all this information, because I can tell, so sort of like Lakhmid is 3rd century, that it doesn't really give you a lot of room to work there with. So, what were the hardest things to find, the easiest, or that sort of thing for you?
Yeah, absolutely. It was so fascinating being able to do the research on the Lakhmid Kingdom, due to the fact that I had so many gaps in my knowledge that I had to fill. I remember when I was researching, there was a lot of times that I was piecing together timelines and just having question marks and like, I need to expand further into this. And finding myself just going down different rabbit holes of learning everything I could about Nestorianism or the different princes and kings of the Lakhmid kingdom. And just there's so many different things that would play into the research. For me, it was both frustrating and also fascinating to be able to see how little information there is in certain topics, and how I would have to take the smallest bit of information that I'd seen within a research paper related to separate things, and really parse together this time frame, this region, and just try to see what information existed. But then also then going down kind of even the separate route of why doesn't this information exist? What's preventing this information? Which was then fascinating in and of itself, like seeing where the written records were, what written records were destroyed. One thing that was really fascinating is I knew nothing about the Paikuli inscription. I'd heard of it before. I knew that it was important, but learning really what it was and like how much information I was able to kind of be found from this like artifact was just absolutely fascinating. And it was very difficult to keep it a small kind of 101, of course, for name of the articles, to keep it to that small bit of information and not go even further in detail of the information, expanding them upon the Sasanian history. However, it was also just fascinating to be able to see how many different Civilization 101 articles that had already been written that were so helpful in me being able to establish where and when for different events with the Lakhmids and see what gaps needed to be filled, and be able to also just expand kind of my knowledge of having that background going into this. So I guess the most difficult part was either cutting down the information that I found or being able to accept the fact that there was going to be gaps in the information, and that my timelines were not going to be this kind of clean-cut Wikipedia article where everything makes sense. It's all just right there laid out for me. And it was a lot of parsing things together, which was just a really fun process to be able to be a part of.
I mean, you hit the nail on the head on why we have these 101s. I will say, please, all the research you did, write another article about. It won't be a 101, so I promise you no word limits. Well, not that crazy long, but you can expand as you need to. If you want to do a whole article on the Paikuli inscription and just go for it, yes, absolutely. What I have heard from many of our writers was the word count is the hardest thing, and then for some of the sections of research, just depending on how well known that empire is today. And so the thing you just mentioned is very much representative of the struggles here, but why I think this is such a valuable exercise to be concise, showcase all of the hyperlinks so people can read more. And you would not be the only one that has written much more about their empire in a separate article. So there is a track record for that as well. I think we're basically at time to wrap up, but any final things about the Lakhmid you'd like to share with us, Abby?
Definitely read the article and continue to learn more about it. It was fascinating. I never thought this would be something that I would be so interested in. I'm definitely more of a global health, international education kind of person, but the history was just so fascinating to learn about.
Incredible. Anna, any final words from you?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I like how you chose the trade-off of having too much information or what to put on the information. Trust me, I had the same issue with the word count. It's like a common thing, but I think that it's great when once we dive in, we're like, all this was out here and none of us know. So I love that. Yeah, you did. It was great.
Yeah, this is a very, very, very strong article, and one of the most hyperlinked ones as well, which is a great thing because that showcases, when you can't have 101 words or you only have 101, that gets you sort of around it in a way, which is lovely. Well, I'm looking forward to this Paikuli deep dive article coming soon. So stay tuned, audience. For now, you can read the hyperlink off her article. And everyone, please go engage with this really fabulous piece of research. Again, alfusaic.net, that's ALFUSAIC.net, and go to the Lakhmid part of our Civilizations 101 section. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you, Abby, for all of this incredible research, name dropping, awareness, and hyperlinking. It is an incredible wealth of knowledge that you are now a Lakhmid expert. So go you. And Anna, as always, it's wonderful to co-interview. We will stop here. Have a great evening, day, and keep learning more about the Lakhmids. Thanks, everyone, for joining.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Abby.